If you had been the midwife who helped Mary deliver the baby Jesus, and if you had been able to hold him in your arms for a few minutes, would you have thought he was precious? You know, one of the most common words I ever hear when someone picks up a baby or sees a new baby or bends over to touch a baby says, "Oh, isn't she precious? Oh, isn't he precious?" You would have thought so. Probably would have said so. And I have no doubt that's what happened that night. I have a painting I downloaded in my computer, and it pops up periodically among my screensavers. It's one of the old Dutch masters, I believe. I forget whose painting it is. But it is of the Nativity. And there is Mary with the baby in her lap. Joseph standing here. There is a shepherd or two, a sheep, and one old cow that's wondering if there's anything she could do to help. It's such a touching picture and so revealing of the fragility, the smallness, the tininess of this child in her lap. Actually, I think the painter probably had the child a little bit larger for the sake of art than he would have been at that moment in time. So small. Something occurred to me this year that hadn't really occurred to me in the same way before. In making himself completely vulnerable as an infant, I don't know how you could be any more vulnerable than that. As an infant, Jesus established the value of every child that comes into the world. Let me say it to you again. In making himself completely vulnerable as an infant, Jesus established the value of every child that comes into the world, for they are all precious. Little boys and little girls, about the most precious thing that will ever enter your life as a mother or a father. Now, thanks to medical science, we can actually see them in the womb, moving, kicking, sucking their thumb. It is the most astonishing thing to see those things and to realize what I'm looking at. Mary, of course, could not see that. She could not have known it, but she certainly knew the reality of a baby that she had in the womb. Know this, and it's just as clear as anything could ever be on the pages of the Bible. From the time of conception, Jesus' identity was established. Don't we all know that? Is there a Christian anywhere on this planet who does not know that Jesus' identity was established at conception? It's impossible to think otherwise. And from the moment of conception, he was precious. The same is true of the child that some women in this room may be carrying tonight and not even know it. It's already known. It is precious. That child is known to God and is written in his book. Already precious in his sight. You have any idea how hard this is for people to get their mind around and grasp and to see, what am I looking, what are you talking about here? Well, you know, even the first Christians had trouble with this, because John had a letter and chastised some people about it and says, look, every spirit that does not confess that Jesus is come in the flesh is not of God. Those who confess that he is are. Now, he's just frustrated. You can read it in his word. He is frustrated that even among the early church, there were people who could not get their mind around the fact of who he was, how he was flesh, how he was vulnerable, and in the way that he was. So Jesus became one of us from beginning to end, from conception to the grave, and beyond where any of us have gone to be raised from the grave. He shared our life. He shared our death. And there is no place in all the Bible that this sharing is plainly set forth than at the moment of his birth. For here it was that Jesus could first be seen, held, loved, even put to the breast. The first time. But you know, as children grow and become annoying at times. They do, don't they? I mean, I can't speak from experience, but I have heard that children can become annoying. Are they any less precious? You know, as a nation, as a state, as a civilization, we have laws on the books protecting children, and we try to do it. I mean, nowadays I'm beginning to wonder sometimes what people are thinking and what they're doing, but nevertheless we're supposed to, and most of the time we do. We were eating at the Golden Corral over in Destin the other night, and a young couple came in with a little boy, not quite two, I think, and they propped him up in the high chair. He was a good little fellow, and I would just watch him from time to time as he would turn completely, almost, squealing all around his chair, looking over the place, watching and seeing everything that was happening. He looked at me a couple of times, and I winked at him, and he would turn back around. It was really interesting to watch. Now, this little fellow did not bang the spoon on the table, and for that I was grateful. But he was so curious. It was fascinating in watching him, and I realized what a miracle that little boy is, and that he is in his way, in our time and our circumstances, his family, just like Jesus was when he was 18 months old. So there is a solidarity that Jesus has with children from the start. And I kind of wonder in a way if that has something to do with his affection for children, his concern for children in his ministry. When people were bringing kids to him for him to bless them, his disciples tried to shoo him away, and he says, "Hey, permit the little children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." All those little children were made in the image of God, as was this little boy in the high chair down at the Golden Corral, made in the image of God, and he was just like Jesus in his way. It adds new meaning, I think, to the scripture where God says, "And God created man in his own image. In his own image created he them, male and female he created them." They are in his image, and when Jesus was born into the world, he brought that image into the world, and hopefully all of us can begin to see the importance of that among the children who are around us day by day. That child would have been in the image of the 18-month-old Jesus, and he was precious. Now, the word precious, as it was sort of kept rolling around my mind as I was reading these scriptures and thinking about it, brought an old scripture to mind. You all know Jeremiah, the prophet. Poor old Jeremiah, but this time he's an old man. The city of Jerusalem has fallen. This is past the time where we wrote, "I just wish my eyes were a river of tears." He was out of tears. He'd cried and he cried and he couldn't cry anymore for the sake of Israel and what had happened to them. And now he walks by burnt out houses. He walks by desolate people and dead bodies. He makes his way through the scripture. And he said, "How is the gold become dim? How is the most fine gold changed? The stones of the sanctuary are poured out in the top of every street." I mean, they scattered the stones, the brick, everything that was there, they'd scattered it all over the place. The precious sons of Zion, comparable to fine gold, how are they esteemed as earthenware pitchers, the work of the hands of the potter? Even the sea monster draws out the breast and gives suck to her young. But the daughter of my people is become cruel like the ostriches in the wilderness. You know what? I fear that even though our country is not in ruins, even though we can go out to eat in good restaurants, and even though we can have relative peace in our land, I fear our country, that spirit that was there, has descended upon us, that there is a cruelty in the daughter of his people. And it bursts out occasionally in mothers killing their children. And I don't understand it. If I live to be 100, I won't understand it. And maybe in the resurrection, when Jesus explains it to me, I'll understand it. On the other hand, I don't know what he will say about it. But these are the areas where it reaches to the uttermost. And short of that, who knows how many hundreds and how many thousands and how many tens of thousands of mothers do damage to their own children, neglect their children, having no concept whatsoever of how absolutely precious those children are. In a sense, I think you can judge a family. I think you can judge a society. I think you can judge a church or a nation by how they treat their little ones. You can tell an enormous about a people from that. I forget who said it too on this regard. When I consider that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever, I fear for my nation. I don't remember if I got it quite right, but I'll say it as my own if I have to. When I consider that God is just and his justice cannot sleep forever, I fear for this people. I'm not embarrassed by this festival in this regard at all, for I feel that we have worked really hard to teach children from the time we opened our doors for the first Feast of Tabernacles in 1996. We didn't do very well back then, but we tried. We tried. How many of you were there by any chance, just out of curiosity? How about that? We made an effort that first year, made a better effort the second year. Then we moved up to the Civic Center in Destin, and we went to work on it again. In the course of time, we began to develop a program called YEA. And it has been a major effort of CEM right from the start to take care of children. We have had, I think, over 150 children on occasion registered for the YEA classes at the feast. And it's one of the best things that we do. It really is. Because we are making an investment in those kids' lives that is absolutely incalculable, and we're doing it because we believe they are precious. Now, I could wish that we had a little more support from families and churches in regard to the work of YEA, and I'll let you think that one over for yourself when you go home or when you go to your church. I wish we could, but we're going to continue to do our best to provide what we can for everybody. Jesus was born into a dangerous world, very dangerous world. Ours, I'm afraid, is going to become dangerous in relatively short order, much more so than we think, I'm afraid. But nevertheless, he was, from the fact of being born in a stable, in an unsanitary situation, to the ultimate threat, he was in a very dangerous time. In Matthew 2, there's a story of the Magi who came from the far east to see Jesus, and they had asked about where he was, and they came to Jerusalem. Where is the one that's born King of the Jews? And they finally determined it's Bethlehem, and the Magi went down there and presented their gifts to Jesus. Herod had told them to come back and tell him where the young child was, not because he wanted to come worship him. No. He had other plans in mind. When the Magi departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the young child, his mother, get down into Egypt, and stay there until I bring word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him." When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and left into Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of by the Lord by the prophet, saying, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." Have you thought about this? I mean, I guess it's clear enough in the pages of the Bible. Why on earth would Herod want to kill a newborn baby? What's going on here? It is, I think, apt testimony to the corruption of power, to the point that people who have power will do almost anything to maintain it, and any threat to that power must be eradicated in whatever means it has to be done, all the way to murder. Now, you can't get your mind around that. You can't even understand it, and I'm just as glad that you can't understand it. I don't want you to understand it. I just want you to believe that it's real, it's possible, it happens, because here it happened. Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent and killed all the children in Bethlehem, all the coasts thereof, 2 years old and under, according to the time he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, In Ramah there was a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. I didn't even check to see if those were male or female babies. They just killed them all. I came across something this week that I hadn't known before. I did not realize that the United States is not all that high in the world in rating on infant mortality. Did you know that? Any number of nations are ahead of us on that scale. France is, Germany is, Japan is the number one nation in the world in terms of infant mortality. Our rate is 7 out of 1,000 newborns die. There's a joker, however, in the stats. I didn't know this either. Here in the good old USA, we count every birth where the baby shows signs of life after birth, no matter its weight, no matter its size. If the little fella or the little girl breathes a breath, if there's a cry, if there's a twitching leg, if there is a movement, this child is counted as an infant, and if it dies, it is counted in the infant mortality rates. We only lose 7 out of 1,000 in that category. I don't think we have done all that bad, so what's going on here? Well, in most of Europe, babies born before 26 weeks gestation, or when they come out of the womb before 26 weeks have passed, they are not counted in the statistics. That is not an instance of infant mortality. Live births, they're not considered live births. Switzerland only counts babies who are at least 11.8 inches long as being born alive. In Canada, Austria, and Germany, only babies weighing at least a pound are considered live births. Any child under that is considered as not a live birth, and therefore they don't count in the statistics. So, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Well, this is what we're looking at here. It's one of those situations where people will quote their stats, but the fact of the matter is, if we start judging people by the same criteria, we're not doing all that bad in all of this. The thing that emerges from this, though, this little thing emerges into the world and takes a breath. In this country, we do everything we can possibly do to save the child. It's human. It has identity. It is one of us. And at that time, if there's anything we can do, we do it. That's just the way we do. And some of them make it. I would say that there's a pretty good chance that some of you in this room are exactly in that category. That you would not even be here if somebody hadn't moved heaven and earth to save your little life when you were born prematurely and were shorter than 11.8 inches in length. Reminds me of the T-shirt I see advertised on the web from time to time. It says, "I survived Roe v. Wade." Anyway, in Japan, who are the champion on infant mortality rates, along with several other nations, they don't count infant deaths that occur in the 24 hours after birth. Almost half of the infant deaths in this country take place the first day. So we can cut off half of ours if we counted them the way the Japanese count them. But in this country, we have always believed that the baby, if it moves, if it breathes, if it twitches, if it cries, it's alive. Do your best for it. And my heart breaks when I hear the story of this nurse who found a baby that had been abandoned in, I don't know what room it was in the hospital, because it was being left to die because it was not going to live. Who stopped and did what she picked the baby up and held it in her arms. I don't remember how many hours it was she sat there, or maybe it's 45 minutes, however long it was, and held that baby in her arms and rocked it until it died. Why'd she do that? Because the child was precious. I don't know what she thought about Christianity. I'd be willing to bet she is a Christian. And I bet she probably could see, like some of us might hope to see, that every child is made in the image of God, and Jesus can be seen in that child. In a very real sense, every effort to save the life of a child is an effort to save Jesus. Now, how can I say that? Isn't that a little extreme? Well, I can say it because of something Jesus said himself. You remember that parable, the third parable of Matthew 25? when he separates the sheep from the goats, and he says to the ones on his right hand, the sheep, "Come, ye blessed of my Father, enter the kingdom of God." And they ask him, and he gets off all these things they've done. They said, "We haven't done, when did we do these? We didn't see you." And he said, "Inasmuch as you have done this to the least of my brethren, you have done it to me. You saved the life of a child, you have done it to him." You go to the trouble to put all the work together and do what you can to teach a child back here in our YEA classes, you've done it to him. The child, yes, the child's a beneficiary, but you have done that for Jesus. When you're out here wandering around, you see a kid that might be getting himself into trouble or in danger of falling off of something, you go over there and find a way just to, shield him from it. You're doing it to Jesus. This is the thing we must learn to do. Every child born into this world is the brother or sister of Jesus. Can you get your mind around that? Do you have any feeling for responsibility that comes our way with that? The world has managed to screw up the celebration of the Nativity of Jesus, and that's really a pity. It's a crying shame, because that celebration in the past has mostly been about children. Most of the beauty, most of the excitement is focused on little eyes and little noses and little ears and the excitement that children can bring to it. Old people, when old people get nostalgic about Christmas, you know why? They're going back to their youth when they were children and what it meant to them. The Nativity of Jesus really is and should be about children. What an opportunity men have missed in this. They could have created something very special. What'd they do? They commercialized it. Now, forgive me, I don't mean to cast a cloud over the celebration of a very happy event, but actually the cloud was already there. It will take the return of a very different Jesus to dispel the gloom that came there. One of the hardest things we have to grasp is the real humanity of Jesus, that he really was flesh, that he really was man, and a child gives us our best shot of dealing with that. Here's what I want you to do. As the feast progresses, I want you, more than you may have ever done before, notice the children. Look at them. If you have a chance to learn their names, learn them, memorize them, don't forget them, because that is that child's name, and it's important. That child, his name is written in God's book. Write it in yours. Do it for babes in arms. Do it for toddlers. Do it for the terrible twos. Do it for the preschoolers, the elementary schools, the preteens, the teenagers. Listen to what they have to say if they're talking. Get their name. Remember their name. What they are saying is important. And you and I need to learn to listen. And when you can call a child by their name, you won't know. I don't think you realize what a difference that can make. Jesus, whichever child you're thinking about or looking at, Jesus was once like this. He once squirmed in church. He once went running up and down the place while his dad tried to chase him down. Saw that happening in the other restaurant the other night. Kid was just happy as he could be. He was just laughing and laughing and laughing, and he was running up this aisle and down that aisle, and his dad finally went around the other way and caught him as he came around. He was having a ball. No, Jesus wouldn't have done that, would he? I think so. And the dad seemed to be enjoying it as much as the kid, as he all really entirely should be. And frankly, all of us in the restaurant, I don't think anybody was bothered by it, amused a little bit. We really need to learn to cut children some slack. Now, I don't mean you don't discipline children. Of course you discipline children to save their lives. You can't reason a child into not running after a ball that goes into the street. And it takes too long for him to learn by experience how bad that is. Discipline is required for some things. Now, Jesus was like each and every one of these kids we're talking about. He might be like the little fellow over here that's sound asleep with his mouth open. I'll bet you there was a time when Jesus was sound asleep in synagogue with his mouth open. It happens.
Every one of these kids now, it is for this reason I'm explaining to you tonight, that we developed the YEA program years ago now. We have put this thing together, and I think we are so close to finishing 900 and some odd lessons that have been written for this program to finish a full-bore curriculum of a lesson for every week of the year, for every year of a child's life from age 3 through 19. You know, when I look at that and I realize the work that Allie and others have done in working on these YEA books, I am flattened to think that we have been able to do this. But you know, there's a funny thing about it, and this is a real life lesson. If you just start somewhere and you keep on doing it, sooner or later, you will be shocked to see how much you have been able to do. I know I go into the studio sometimes to sit down and do a radio program, and Gary will pop the thing in there and get it all ready to go, say, okay, here we go, number 817. You know, it's hard for me to realize that. It's exhausting to think about. And yet, it has just been done one broadcast at a time. You just keep doing it. Sort of like I said about how to stay married for 50 years, back when we'd only been married 50 years. I said you get married young and you stay married. That's the whole secret. Nothing much to it. But you have to understand, what we have developed at CEM and YEA program is a system for teaching our kids about God. And this is something you need to know. Usually, if you don't have a system, nothing happens. If you're just going to do something when you think about it, it'll probably never think about it. If you're going to get around to it someday, you probably will never get around to it. Somewhere, somehow, you have to adopt a system, and that is what we have tried to create. Jesus, you know, had to go to school. You did know that, didn't you? Jesus went to school, and he learned what the rabbis were teaching in school, so that whenever he finally started his ministry, he knew what they were going to say before they said it. Most preachers repeat themselves a lot, including the Jewish ones as well. He had to go there. He had to be careful. He had to try to stay awake. He had to fight the boredom from time to time. Well, if you're able to help us, please help us to carry out this God-ordained task. I say God-ordained because he said very plainly, teach your children. Teach them when they get up in the morning, teach them when you're putting them to bed at night, teach them sitting at table at meals, teach them all the time. Well, you know, we're trying to do our best in this regard, and we would really appreciate any help, support, encouragement that you can pass on down the line. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get volunteers to teach at YEA at the feast. If you're in a position to help us, and we're short of volunteers, wouldn't it be nice if you knew about it? Well, go ask. There's a YEA table back there. If you want to learn about what we're doing, if you'd like to just help out, if you'd just like to be a kid catcher, you know, and one heads for the door, crawling on his all fours, volunteer. Go talk to them, because we are doing some things here, I think, that are extremely important. If you can find a better system, or if you can tell us how to improve the system that we have put together, tell us. We want to know, because for us, the objective is the precious child. It's not us. It's not about CEM. It's not about our organization. It's about the kids. They are precious in his sight. Help us here. Help us at home. Help us at church. If there's a way we can do it better, tell us, because we will respond. By the way, give special consideration to expectant moms. Now, I don't know how you do that. I don't know what there is that you need to do. But when you recognize that a woman is pregnant, open the door for her. Do something for her. You know, consider the fact that she is carrying a child made in the image of God. It's going to be born in the world. Who knows what it's going to be? It could be the person that finds a cure for cancer. It could be a person who finds a cure for diabetes. When I think of all of the wasted lives that we have created in this country, I fear for us. I really do. I just can't see how we're going to turn things around short of catastrophe. And I don't know about the world. All I can do is talk to you. We have got to do a better job with our kids. I'm not talking about child rearing. I'm not spanking them more. That's not the point. The point is we got to do a better job of our kids coming into life and not being able to remember a time when they didn't know about Jesus, believe in Jesus, and know that they ought to do what he says. That's what I'd like to see us come to. Some of us start a little late, but it's never too late to begin to learn these things. Treat those expectant mothers like you would treat Mary if she were here. That call for a lot? I don't know. Mary would have liked to have had a better room, I think, than the one she ended up with. Consider that, when you see a woman's... I passed a woman today, I forget where it was now, sitting on a bench, and she was very, very pregnant. And she looked a little bit tired. And as I walked by, I caught her eye, and I gave her a big smile, and she smiled back. And I think the smile helped. If that's all you can do it. It was the recognition, you are there, you're a person, you're important. And she was, because she is the mother of a new child made in the image of God, ready to come into the world. And remember, Jesus was once like that. Inside that woman is a growing child, not a fetus, a growing child. And once, Jesus was just like that. It came to pass in those days, Luke chapter 2, verse 1, there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that the world should be taxed, and all went to be taxed, every one to his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, unto Judea, to the city of David, called Bethlehem, because he was the house of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. As I've told you before, I just love that expression, and it calls a vivid image to mind. And it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. She brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Do you know why? Was it just an accident that there was no room for them in the inn? Surely God could have arranged a Holiday Inn for his son to be born in, or something like that, the equivalent of the time, a house, a home, or something better than that, couldn't you? Of course he could. Why didn't he? Because he wanted his son to be born in the most humble circumstances imaginable. Because his son was to be not some high muckety-muck. He was to be one of us, like us, in every respect, from the womb to the tomb. So she laid him in a manger because there was no room in the inn. And there were in the country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And they were sore afraid. And the angel said to them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you great tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. It is utterly impossible for us to fully grasp the impact of those words on those men. Because I think they understood that what was being announced to them was the birth of the Messiah that had been expected for generations. He's here, and we're going to tell you about him. This shall be a sign to you. You will find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. A sign? Sure. The lowliness of his birth. Not in a palace, not even in a hotel, not in an inn, in a stable. I want you fellows to notice this, because he is like you. This shall be a sign. You'll find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. I would have loved to have heard that song. Maybe someday I will.